Is the Final Fantasy TCG dying? No, it's not, but I am concerned. So let's talk the history about the Final Fantasy trading card game. The Final Fantasy TCG or FFTCG started back around 2011 and went on till about 2015 in Japan with its chapter series, and with it came some very unique artwork styles and gameplay. It was well received by Japanese audiences and was growing strong. However, the chapter series seemed to mainly focus on trading card game communities and didn't really target fans of the Final Fantasy series. More on that later. By 2016, Square Enix decided to relaunch the Final Fantasy trading card game with the Opus series, starting with Opus 1 in 2016 and launched to both Asian and Western audiences around the world during that time. This time, Square Enix was focused on not only the trading card game base, but their larger Final Fantasy series fan base. At least so we thought. It was supposed to be an extremely genius idea since the Final Fantasy series has had a growing audience since 1987. That's 9 years before the release of the very first Pokemon game. Many people know what the Final Fantasy series is, mainly due to the popular video game series. Even here in Seattle, where I live, the popular Seattle Symphony does pop culture performances, and we'll do a full hour's worth of just Final Fantasy music. It's beautiful, and I highly recommend it if you ever get an opportunity to watch it. So, Square Enix releasing a TCG just made sense. Like Pokemon, it catered to their video game fan base and to a TCG fan base as well. I myself discovered Final Fantasy back in the late 80s, but fell in love with the series with the US release of Final Fantasy 3, which I talk about on this channel all the time. So, when I discovered that Final Fantasy had a trading card game back in 2020, I was so freaking excited and hooked. As a former Yu Gi Oh! Competitive player, it only made sense for me to dive into this new TCG series. What shocked me was that by this time, Square Enix was already into their 11th opus, and I had no idea there was even a Final Fantasy trading card game. That's basically 11 releases so far by that time. I was just lucky enough to randomly find it in a small town of New Mexico during vacation while I was looking for some Yu Gi Oh cards. But like Konami, Square Enix is awful when it comes to advertising their trading card games. So I wasn't too shocked that Square Enix didn't do much to promote their TCG. Once I got back home, I opened my first pre release kit of Opus 11. I was in such awe of how most of the cards looked. It was just freaking amazing, but unfortunately, there were some rather disappointing artworks. More on that later. But I didn't let that bother me. I messaged my sister, who's a huge Final Fantasy fan, got her a pre release kit. We bought some starters, and I went over to her place and we learned how to play the game. Immediately, two big things hit me. First, the game was very easy to get into. Secondly, the mechanics were so smart, exciting, just plain fun. It reminded me greatly of Yu Gi Oh's early days, which were so fun and addictive, which Yu Gi Oh lost to, over time for me. So I made a huge transition into supporting the Final Fantasy TCG series instead of Yu Gi Oh! I jumped in hard like so many other fans of trading card games. I mean, after all, it made sense, right? Here we have another long, well-known video game series like Pokemon, and it had a huge fan base. Surely we should see healthy support for the Final Fantasy TCG game from Square Enix. And this is where I, like so many of you, have become so incredibly disappointed and frustrated with Square Enix. Pre COVID, the Final Fantasy TCG was growing strong and fast. Organized play was growing and collectors were vested. But then COVID happened, and all trading card games had to slow or even halt production, and TCG communities didn't see quite the same amount of people growth. However, I believe that this is where collectors and TCG communities allow TCGs, especially the Final Fantasy TCG, to survive through the pandemic, which is maybe a topic for another video. But as the pandemic came to an end and TCG players and collectors looked forward to Square Enix announcing competitive play and how they were going to support local game stores, we as the Final Fantasy TCG fans found ourselves greatly disappointed. Square Enix was just so slow in their plans for organized play. And in fact, I myself was disappointed that Square Enix didn't just support organized play through the pandemic, just like Yu-Gi-Oh, Magic the Gathering, and Pokemon did through video stream. But the Final Fantasy TCG community waited and waited and waited on Square Enix. Now, I want to talk specifically to you, Square Enix, or any employee of the company that may see this, and hopefully give a crap about your community within the Final Fantasy TCG. What are you doing with the Final Fantasy TCG? Do you even care about it anymore? If you do more. Otherwise, just end it already. Stop dragging it along because you're frustrating your community. It sometimes feels like you only want to put 45% effort into this, and the rest of that 55% you just lazily shrug away and rely on the TCG community to carry. And let me be clear, that 55% you leave on the table is important. That's 55% which could go more into organized play, which is probably the most important, advertising, which is like your second important, social media support, and continued efforts into improving the TCG art and gameplay. So first, let's talk about the game's artwork design. 95% of it is freaking incredible, astounding, just beautiful. But that last 5% is pure crap. And it may not seem important to you, but when you put up your artwork or your design in the TCG against any other TCG, that terrible 5% can make any potential customer of your TCG feel like you just don't care. Stop with the lazy Windows 98 screenshot artwork on some of your cards. You have some of the most amazing artists in the world. I truly believe this. So why do this when you have this in contrast? It makes us, your fan base, feel like you kind of care, but only so much. To be clear, the few terrible artworks you choose to put on cards is a fraction of the issue. Maybe like 5% of that 55%, but it's hard to ignore when you're compared to other TCG artworks. I mean, you're freaking Square Enix. Again, you have some of the most incredible artists on your staff. Next up, let's talk advertising, which, to be blunt, you all suck at. Some of that 55% you leave on the table can go into advertising. I've complained time and time again about this. Learn from your competitors like Magic the Gathering or Pokemon. Heck, even newer TCGs are better at this than you all are, and that's embarrassing. It's so incredibly frustrating to me and the community that so many people have no idea you all have a TCG, especially when you have literally over 20 million people on Final Fantasy XIV right now, on which you can do small things like put up banners in the worlds in Final Fantasy XIV that showcase the Final Fantasy TCG. Or even better yet, you already have an online demo of how to play the game. Just have some of your developer team port that over to a mini game inside of Final Fantasy XIV and give awards to those who participate in it. Going back to Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon, and Magic the Gathering, where's your online version of the game? Seriously, like where is it? It's 2023, and not having some sort of online support and or presence for your TCG is just lazy. You can't and shouldn't always rely on the physical game for this stuff. Physical game is important. It's the most important. But you really should have some sort of online presence with the TCG in 2023. Partner up with FFDex or with the Final Fantasy TCG tabletop communities to make this happen if you don't want to use any of your developer resources. And when you have some sort of online game, maybe lure some folks in with digital pack giveaways, and vice versa, give digital codes for free packs to those that buy physical packs of the TCG. Pokemon does this. It's okay to copy good ideas from other companies that do this. They do it because it works, so what's your excuse? Unless, like I said, you just don't care. Back to that 55% you leave on the table. Organized play and the support of your local game stores or LGSs. They are literally your path to success with the physical TCG. What happened to the support you initially gave your LGSs? Why are some of your prize supports so mediocre? Why not have monetary winnings? Magic the Gathering does it. It's not gambling. If you're worried about monetary winnings being bad for kids, You can target younger kids with custom trading card game gameplay styles and do a competitive scene with the kids that give unique prizes for certain age groups. But if you've spent any time in an LGS, you'll easily find that the primary audience for the Final Fantasy TCG are adults. Going back to the LGS, where's the LGS support in providing judges or assisting with online game streams? Why not give out free product to your LGSs and give it out on time, which they can then use to promote the game? You need to give your bread and butter, that's the LGSs, a reason to keep supporting the game. Did you forget that without organized play and LGS support, you might as well cancel the Final Fantasy TCG and be done with it, because it just will not succeed. This is the most important part of having any successful trading card game. If you can nail down the organized play support within LGSs and the support of your LGSs, you win. We all win. And lastly, with that 55%, why don't we see your product in big box stores like Walmart or Target? And where's the support for the game in Akihabara? I once emailed you all about this. Seriously, I did. And I did get a response, and it was a lazy and disappointing response. You basically told me that it's on big box stores to buy product and promote the TCG. What? No. What reality do you live in? That's your job, to promote the TCG and to incentivize big box stores to buy your product for them to sell. Disney already is pushing to sell Lorcana in big box stores, just like Magic the Gathering, Yu-Gi-Oh, and Pokemon. Why aren't you? Oh, and before I forget, Square Enix, where can I get feedback on your trading card game? Like, seriously, where? Do you even care what the community has to say about the TCG? Okay, please forgive my harshness, Square Enix. If you even spare some time to watch this, or if anybody from your company watches this, I'm sorry. I don't mean to be so harsh, but it's been frustrating. And if someone does know how to get this to Square Enix and you think it'll matter, please do share this video with them. I know I'm a small channel, but every social media personality trying to promote the Final Fantasy trading card game can only do so much when the company that makes the game does so little. Now, going to go back to talking to you all, the players, collectors, supporters of the Final Fantasy trading card game. Look, Final Fantasy TCG still has a future, okay? Just as with any TCG, it has its ups and downs, but I do remain hopeful overall. Square Enix has announced plans for new product through 2025. They continue to innovate on game mechanics and new card game designs, which excites me the most as primarily a collector. People still desire both new cards and organized play events, which see good turnouts. The player base has grown after all and continues to see growth, albeit small growth, but it's still growth. The community is still buying, selling, trading. Final Fantasy TCG survived the 2 and 4 year mark where many TCGs die, and Square Enix is still planning on organized play events. They just need to support it better. And I know people have skepticism about the Final Fantasy and Magic the Gathering collaboration, but I really do not. Square Enix is doing this collaboration with Wizards along with other video game companies. So I'm sure Wizards reached out to various popular game companies and requested collaboration. Don't forget that the Final Fantasy Magic the Gathering collab follows the Assassin's Creed, Fortnite, Fallout, and Warhammer collabs. So this has nothing to do with the end of the Final Fantasy TCG and more to do with just representing the Final Fantasy franchise in this universe crossover stuff that Magic the Gathering is doing. I think this can be a great form of advertising for the TCG. I'm very optimistic about this. Now, let's talk quickly about the state of TCGs in general. And that is that all TCGs are seeing a downturn. And that has to do with many economical and life events people are facing across the world right now. Stores are dropping Yu-Gi-Oh! Pokemon sealed product value is so volatile. Magic the Gathering product isn't moving like Wizards hoped with the universe crossover stuff. And so of course, smaller TCGs are going to take a hit as well. The reason why we see Lorcana flying off the shelves is because it's the new shiny thing. But look, like with anything new, it will eventually slow down and prices will fall with that too. Something I like to quote all the time, nothing changes under the sun, which just means that with all things, there will be ups and downs, rinse and repeat. So then, enjoy and celebrate the ups, enjoy and learn from the downs. Times are hard for everyone right now, and priorities aren't on buying new TCG product, but rather buying food or paying for rent or mortgages. But it'll get better in time. It's going to be okay. Thank you for your time and for listening to me ramble, and please do subscribe to my channel. I know I'm very busy as of late, and I am not quitting the Final Fantasy trading card game. I still buy singles and products. I've just been busy is all. But I will try to make more Final Fantasy TCG content as long as Square Enix continues to make more Final Fantasy TCG product and announcements. Thank you all for listening, and I hope Square Enix listens to this, and if not me, to somebody on improving things. Remember, you're all wonderful, you're all beautiful, and you're all loved. Bye bye.